5 years from now, or maybe sooner, AIs could be smarter than us. We're entering into weird transformative times.
What's up, and welcome to another episode of the AI Download. I'm your host, Shira Lazar. And let me tell you, this has been a busy, historic, groundbreaking week in the world of social media, media at large, and AI. Sora, the app, launched, and it is just crazy. Literally, it broke social media. So we're going to get into that, what it means for the future of our culture, our lives, and media at large, as I mentioned, and entertainment. And I've got an incredible guest to unpack it. He's basically the best guest to talk about this today. Not only does he have a podcast, AI for Humans, where he gets into this with Gavin Purcell, he also is the showrunner and co-creator of Attack of the Show on G4 TV. Remember that way back then? And was an executive producer for Late Night with Jimmy Fallon. He also basically brought Fallon into the digital era. He just launched a new company. It's called AndThen. It's a voice-first studio for interactive AI stories. My special guest today, since I haven't revealed it, is Gavin Purcell. But first, before we get into that conversation, a huge thanks to our series sponsor, Hivelighter. They're your AI-powered reading assistant, bringing you smart, personalized insights so you can spend less time scrolling and more time doing. Please go check them out at hivelighter.ai. And now, enjoy my conversation with Gavin Purcell. Gavin, it is so great to have you here. When you said yes, it felt like a huge win because I haven't seen you in forever, but I'm seeing what you're doing online and you're doing such cool stuff. So thank you again for your time.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we've known each other for, forever now, right? Like, it's one of those things, we go way back to like the what I refer to as the Web2 blogging days in some form, or like early video stuff, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, Attack of the Show.
Yep. Which is it's funny. So the thing I'm working on right now, and my podcast, my co-founder of my podcast and the company we're on is Gavin Purcell, who is the host of that show. And like, it's been very fun to kind of play in a space that I think that show kind of started to kind of pay attention to, which was interesting. Like, just so everybody knows, like, I was the showrunner and a co-creator of that show. If you're not familiar, it was a daily live show that covered tech and web culture. And it started in like, I want to say 2005 was when Attack of the Show came out. And then 2007, I left and went to go work with Jimmy Fallon in New York, but it was a super fun time.
You know, no biggie. I mean, that was a huge leap too. So you've always been at the forefront of doing cool stuff. Yeah. That's a huge deal. You basically brought Jimmy Fallon into the tech era. Let's be clear.
By the way, Jimmy, very tech savvy and smart guy too. And like, but we were able to, the two of us in the beginning stages, I was a producer writer on that show, but also headed up all their digital, was able to kind of like lead that space. I'll always remember, like, it was Jimmy, Shaq, and Ashton Kutcher were the three kind of main celebrities that were on Twitter first. And it was like, you know, remember those days where like Leo Laporte was a big Twitter celebrity, or like, you know, people like that. And again, Leo's a guy who's been doing it forever, but like, it was a weird transformative moment. And obviously that set the stage for like everything we're living in now, right? This world of like the creator economy, and how what I refer to, and a lot of people now talk about, the great flattening of access to things. This idea that like, if you have an audience and you can serve it or super serve it, you can have a huge amount of value. It doesn't matter if you're a traditional celebrity or not. So like, all of that kind of gestated there. And well, I'm sure we'll talk about this, but like, the reason why AI and all the stuff that's happening in AI right now is so interesting to me is I see a lot of parallels between the kind of 2005 to 2008 era with the era that we're looking at right now too.
Oh my God, so much good stuff. And it's interesting that you called it a flattening. I always say, you know, more of an opening, like the gates opening.
Sure. Either way, what it means is more people have access to more things, right? And that era from 2005 to even like 2010, I think of as either the opening or the flattening of distribution, which means that like everybody in the world can suddenly get their stuff in front of people. Now, a lot of it wasn't good at that time. It wasn't something that people wanted to watch because it was, you know, the guy crying underneath the blanket, which was still very watched by quite a few. But like, it was blogs, it was kind of not very well shot web videos and things like that. And the distribution platform has now opened up to everybody, and professional content is using those distribution platforms. So that's why YouTube is like the king of all sort of media now, and why if you own your own content and you're able to take it out to that large platform, you can monetize at super high levels, which is what creators did to at such like an incredible amount right now. So the distribution of content was kind of democratized or flattened or open then. And now we're looking at like the kind of creation of content, and the creation of that is starting to get flattened and opened up in a different way. So like this is like the democratization of creation that we're going through right now. And I think it's giving a lot of people feelings, which I understand, but also it allows people to have things and make things that they really wasn't possible before.
Love what you just said, because it was just a great way of looking at it, that the digital social era, YouTube era, et cetera, was a democratization of the pipes distribution, right? But there were still so many barriers to entry, especially if you wanted to do something at a quality level. I mean, what made social great is it was very raw. And a lot of people could do raw stuff, although the phone became more high quality, et cetera. But this next version or level that we're getting into, and we're already there, is a democratization of the tool.
It used to be that like you needed to have like at least a camera. You needed to have like the ability to do stuff. But also what you needed to know, especially in the creator world, was like, how do I create a hook? How do I make something that will bring somebody in? How do I think about the people that are going to see this, and how do I super serve those? And that's been like the winning structure on TikTok for like the last year, 2 years, let's say. And what Sora 2 has done, which is really kind of both scary and fascinating at the same time, is they have made the actual like creative part of it. And it's not just like the tools, which is the thing I think that is really interesting to me, is like, yes, the tools are democratized, but they've actually done something with Sora 2 that I think not enough people are talking about right now, which is that with very small prompts, they are kind of like, they've trained on the world of media, and we can talk about what that means for everybody and everything. But like, there are hooks built into some of this stuff, right? Like there are jokes built into some of this stuff that are not being written by people and make it entertaining in a way that like is a much bigger deal than just the democratizing of tools. Like it really becomes a democratizing of like the collective experience of making stuff in a really fascinating way.
And I noticed when I did this prompt of me cuddling with a golden retriever, which is hilarious because I could do that. So I don't know why I just did it in a fake world as well. But it was amazing because it was doing these like cuts as if it was a vlog style.
Yes.
And it was making it more interesting. It wasn't just a fully played out video of the prompt. It made it into as if I edited together, which made it more interesting to watch. So it is formatting it for this social era as well, which is really fascinating.
When I think about culture and the way that culture changes over time, I think a lot about meme culture. I think a lot about how things rise and fall. And one of the things that's really interesting to me is watching things, even right now in the Sora app, like take off and then kind of have like a moment of life cycle of their own, and then that moves on to the next thing.
Can you break it down? Because we even got into Sora right away. And some people might not realize OpenAI, the top AI company behind ChatGPT, launched Sora. It's a video prompt AI app, but also a social network. It's like TikTok. TikTok and AI had a baby on steroids.
And it's a new video model. That's the biggest thing, right? So we're talking about a state-of-the-art video model that allowed people to do stuff that they've never really been able to do things. But the big key here, I think the differentiator versus like, say, many other companies that are trying to do something in this vein is the Cameo feature, which allows you to very easily record a very quick snippet of your voice and a very quick snippet of your face moving in a different direction, the same way you would maybe do for when you unlock your iPhone, like that sort of thing with that sort of information. And it allows other people to create videos with you in it. The secret sauce that OpenAI has figured out with Sora 2, especially the social network side of it, is they have allowed people to be participatory with each other, right? And also like found a nice way of like allowing people to say like, hey, we give you permission to let people create stuff. But more importantly, they have given every friend group a reason to onboard, right? And if you can imagine like a click-through moment of like, hey, I just made this video of myself with whoever, with Sam Altman or whatever, and they say, I want to do that. And then that person comes in, logs their face, and then suddenly they're making a video with that person. Like it is a almost perfect onboarding mechanism to an entirely new type of video. And because we talked about before, the video it's producing and the prompts they're asking for are much less than some of these other tools have been before. You're seeing stuff coming from very normal people that is pretty remarkable. Like, and I think I dare anybody who's listening to this, like, we can get into the whole AI slop argument, which is something big, but like, Right now, I truly believe, and it might be because like there's also a lot of IP things that are happening on Sora 2, but when you scroll through Sora 2, which is very much designed like TikTok, I think it is more interesting and more charming. And I am a heavy TikTok user than TikTok is right now. And that's saying something, right? Like there's a really interesting thing that's going on there. So here's the thing that kind of all goes hand in hand with AI slot, because many people very quickly, if you're not familiar with the Italian brain rot, you may, or ask a 10-year-old that you know, they know it's probably over to them already. But Italian brain rot was a movement still happening. In fact, one of the biggest games on Roblox right now is an Italian brain rot kind of derivative and is making a fortune. This was AI generated video with of very surreal animals, like Bombadillo Crocodillo, which is a crocodile mixed with an old bomber plane. And it had a voice that went along with it that was AI, right? And it was like just these kind of weird TikToks that popped up. One of the things, to go to what I was saying before, that's interesting about this moment of how memes move and how like IP, all this other stuff happens, is like nobody owns the Italian brain rot IP. Like there's no person in the world who says like, I can make money off this thing, because it came out collectively out of this group of people on TikTok, and it has spread so far and fast that there's really going to be no way of defending that as a business. But there's a world where you could see, like, if somebody created their own Italian brain rot and maybe they got really deep on one character, there's a world that could exist. But the more interesting part of it is the reason it worked in part is because of this kind of like shareability and the ability to kind of like see the thing and make your own, or then take one of the ones and turn it into something else. So I think that's what I mean about kind of getting weirdly back to this remix culture, and what I think Sora 2 kind of leans into a little bit.
I think it's awesome when we're putting stuff into the zeitgeist, and then we could just be creative. As a creative, though, then I think of still who's making the money off of it. That's where the attention is going, and where's the money going? How are these communities continuing to stay afloat? It does become just a passion project. I think there's going to be a lot of creators and new influencers emerging from this app and this new space as well. But then in the end, who wins? Sam Altman still?
Well, for sure. I mean, unfortunately, yes. Like, I think the big platforms and OpenAI, you consider a platform in a lot of ways like Meta is, right? Like, it's very much that thing. I do think there's a world where creators can succeed, but I think the question becomes more about getting back to that, like, kind of distribution question. Like, if you can create and understand distribution channels for the kinds of things you make, you know, there's different pathways. One, you can ride these things as they come up, and you can, you know, figure out how to get your brand to be bigger and bigger. When I say your brand, really, I mean like you as a brand, not necessarily like, you know, your version of an IP. The other side of this is I think there's going to be a whole world of what I call micro studios that are going to spin up, and they're going to be 1 to 5 people who are going to be able to make content, and this will be more kind of directly created to kind of like think about how do we make a character that we can kind of play with. To me, that's like a really interesting pathway to like how to succeed in this space. And by the way, now that can happen with AI too. Like a good friend of ours he goes by NeuralViz, NEURALViz. If you're familiar with him, like he has a character named Tiggy Skipples, which is like he's created a whole universe, and that character has millions of views on TikTok, and his YouTube page has like, I think 500,000 subs. And, you know, he just released a 12-minute kind of pilot for what would be a really cool series, but he did it all by himself. He did it in 2 weeks, and, you know, with off-the-shelf tools. So like, that's that kind of micro studios world that people are going to need to kind of like lean into the idea of like, okay, I'm going to try to create something for myself rather than be part of this kind of overarching world. But I think it's going to be possible in a really interesting way.
Yeah, and it's really about having that creative vision. And again, I feel like playing around with the Sora app, and I want to get into your stuff. But like
sure,
it happened,
totally.
this was a big week for this app, and I do think this is like a historic shift.
Absolutely.
So it's also great to have you on to talk about this. In playing with it, there were so many things that came to mind. One, it was amazing to see what I was thinking about creating as prompts. Like, I don't know why I decided to have like my dog in bed with me, because I could have that. And my boyfriend actually really encouraged me. He's like, no, you got to be prompting like things that like would be crazy, like you wouldn't typically do.
Yes.
And I'm like, it is an exercise in like really expanding your mind and creativity and thinking about like things that are impossible.
Yeah.
Which I think is an amazing, also personal growth exercise.
The thing I think a lot about is, I'm sure you've heard of like the kind of infinite channels kind of thing around like where like it's Rick and Morty has that, or other shows have this idea that you flip around. It's like the multiverse TV. Conan used to do a very funny bit on his show about it. What Sora 2 feels like is that, right? Like you see people but they are in different lives. They're living different lives that you have not seen before. And it's them experiencing things with their face in a world that you've never seen it in. And that's the thing that feels like some sort of weird unlock where your imaginations now are no longer limited by what you can shoot with this, but they're much bigger, right? They're a much bigger and much broader. And I think no one yet is thinking about this. I've started to kind of put my brain around something around this, but like this is the beginning stage of like how we are going to completely, honestly, as a species, rethink how we think of ourselves. And this was always the argument around like VR or AR, that in the future, like, there's a great show called Years and Years on HBO, which I find that was really depressing, but it was about the future. And in that show, one of the arguments is, there's all these conversations now about people wanting to choose their gender, or all these other sort of things that are really important to people on their personal choices. In that show, they had a young character who was like going through the choice of like wanting to be present as not human. And like, that's this weird world that where suddenly we're opening ourselves up to this kind of entirely different experience of what it means to interact with these kind of unusual, strange spaces outside of our day-to-day life. Now, granted, there's going to be a lot of people out there who are going to be like, this is an incredibly bad thing for humanity, and like it is not a good thing going forward. I'm generally on the side of like the kids will be all right sort of thing, like in that world, but it's got a lot of implications that I'm not sure people are completely thinking about yet.
I do want to talk about the implications and your thoughts as someone who is a media master and has been covering the space. I do want to also just quickly touch on the mind-blowing social aspect of this that is really leaning into remix culture. This app is going to make you think about not just the crazy, fantastical stuff you want to create and put yourself into, but then how it will encourage others to join in. And it creates more shareability, more discoverability. Yeah. And then on the flip side, you want to be adding yourself to other big people's videos and doing it in a creative way, because that's a good way for them to notice you and their followers to notice you. So I'm already seeing the social network aspect of it and like the expansion of how you would do that, which is really cool. Also, then it just starts like getting you in your head of, oh, how am I going to create this so it gets more shareability? That's how I start thinking of all these things, which don't overanalyze, just have fun with it. But it was interesting to see already kind of the rule being set. You know what I mean?
This is what's so impressive about this. Like social networks are almost impossible to launch now. And the Meta AI app, I think, is a good example of that. But this had an onboarding process. It also had a core piece of technology that clearly surprised people when they saw it, right? Because I think that's part of this AI world right now we're living in. And, maybe it's a good transition to talk about why I think it's interesting to work in this space, is that there's this level of surprise that's happening that hasn't happened for a while with technology. And when I say surprise, what I mean is like, there are things you can do now with these tools, and each step along the way, that every time we've kind of been introduced to another AI tool, it feels a little more surprising. Like I remember seeing GPT-3 for the first time, and I felt kind of, whoa, this is kind of cool. And then early Midjourney was like, the pictures were all funky, but like, it was like, wow, this can do this. And then every step along the way, you have these moments of like surprise. You're like, oh, we're here now. And this is just a kind of next step in that path. What's so interesting to me about, the idea of like this creation with these tools is there's a world where that surprise thing has only been accessible by the people who were kind of able to do the stuff before, right? Like, because a lot of it, I also say like one of the kind of bummers of content creation in general is like so much of it feels like it's become like commoditized, and like this hook plus this thing plus this much time will get you this many views. Like all of that feels like just disappointing as a creator, because you're like, I have to learn all this stuff. And what's interesting about this is at any beginning stage of any new format, and that's really what we're talking about here, is like a new format, new thing, the rules are kind of rewritten, right? So, it's like the whole idea that you can kind of like figure out what's happening in the same way that when Twitter first launched or any of this stuff, it feels like it's a play space. And I think the world actually needs more play spaces, because we're so like bogged down by data right now. But that's what's cool about it. I know a lot of people hate the fact that it feels like we're over AI slopping the world at large. And to me, that I get that feeling, and I understand, especially from a creator standpoint, like when you've spent 15 to 20, 30 years of your life focused on how can I make the best piece of content, especially from a film and television standpoint. Well, now you've got all these people making this stuff that in a lot of ways might be more compelling to them, right? Because I think that's the other side of this is we're talking generational shifts. Like a lot of people that are in their 30s, 40s, and 50s are just going to see this and be like, I don't understand this at all. Like, I don't get why people can like this.
Yeah.
And then people in their teens or even younger, they're like, this is what I do.
So you think that, and maybe this is an idea for what's trending, like there will be the first news organization there and they will actually be telling news headlines, but it will just be with fake people.
It's already happening. I've seen fake news reports in Sora already, right?
Well, I want real news. Like imagine it was
you could do that, right? Like you could definitely do that. I mean, it's hard with 10 seconds right now, but like many people listening may understand this. There's like a fish in a box and it's like a SpongeBob reference. I don't actually know the reference. I wasn't that deep on SpongeBob, but it gave out real headlines and said real news, but it said it like with a talking fish. Like that became a giant channel on TikTok, and like there will be versions of this on Sora. The thing I think that's going to be interesting, and I think that what's making it so much fun right now is part of what's fun about it is you can bring all of this IP in. And we know what happened when like the 4.0 image gen thing launched and the giblification moment of the internet. And OpenAI had to pull back a lot of that stuff. So part of what you're seeing right now is like archival footage. So like I generated this video of like Elvis eating in his 1970s kind of leather outfit. Now this is a very specialized video. Right now there's like Cartman, Pikachu, like all these characters.
Have they done licensing deals with those companies already?
I don't know. We just talked about this on AI for Humans. My assumption is a lot of things you can't generate. You can't generate Disney characters. I tried. The one that I'm not sure though is Nintendo, because right now you can generate Mario, Pikachu, and all these other things. Because the story that came out from the Wall Street Journal last week was like Sam Altman and OpenAI gave these companies about about a week, 1 week to decide if they wanted to opt in or opt out. So that's a big question. But you would assume that most studios would be like, F no, I'm out. Definitely don't do this to us. So who knows? Maybe those studios did opt in.
At what point it's like, I'm sure there's corners that are inappropriate.
Yeah, I mean, and by the way, there are really strong guide rails on like what's promptable and what's not promptable in this. Like there's a lot of things against like, nudity or anything like that. You can't prompt. In fact, I think Kevin was telling me on the show, like you can't prompt anything shirtless, even if you're a guy. So like, that's just a hard no. The other thing is like, there's a lot of rules against like, obviously what can be said, like, hate speech and all that stuff. I've not seen any of that stuff come up, which is a good thing. So there's pretty guardrails around that. But like, there are ways around that. Like, I have not seen this directly, but I heard a story from somebody that there was some sort of like Nazi-ish SpongeBob, like, and it maybe isn't exactly Nazi, but like enough that you're like, oh, that brand would definitely not like that thing.
I appreciate the guardrails that they did have, that they did think about this, and then the rest will be thinking about it as they go. You did mention implications. Let's talk about that.
Two different ways to look at implications. One is from OpenAI, like I saw a rumor, which was interesting. This is a complete conjecture, but that maybe what they're trying to do is like get everybody to band together and sue them so they can make one deal with everybody. And OpenAI now has raised enough money that they might be able to do like a ginormous like deal with these companies. I don't know how real that is. I think more likely it's like trying to force some version of if your listeners and viewers are familiar, there's a lot of conversations around like what the law is here. And a lot of it was set by a weird legal precedent from the 2000s around Google Books when they scanned Google Books and whether or not you could actually scan something that existed and if that was transformative or not. Back in the day, it wasn't. So a lot of these companies will argue that like, hey, we're just scanning this stuff and it's making it available. The argument though on the other side is, and James Cameron has come down in this way, is it shouldn't be policing the input, which would be the scanning or the kind of the training of the model. It should be policing the output. So if there's output that's coming out that isn't allowed, they shouldn't allow that. And again, they have cut down on some of it. Implications from society-wide, like I think this gets back to what I was saying before, is everything that people use has some sort of transformative effect, at least at scale, right? Like we know in a lot of ways what Twitter and Facebook's effect was on the world, not positive really. And I think we can all say that like in general, what was great about that in the moment now has kind of like proven to be this weird, common space that is kind of ugly in a lot of times and kind of has brought a lot of hate speech and other things into the world. I think the good news is people are much more aware of how tech platforms affect themselves in a way that they weren't maybe 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I feel like it's really hard to know though, right? Like I think what I was saying before about this idea of like, I think it will transform how we think of ourselves and I think start to think about the real world. So, when you pair that with the idea that like 5 years from now, AIs could be, smarter than us as a human, or maybe sooner, like we're entering into weird transformative times.
Yes. And for me as a creator, I'm like, another platform I need to like it's liberating and then it becomes tiring.
Yeah, it becomes work, right?
If I don't have a big community there or I'm not doing there, like, and as someone who covers this space, like I want to be in every place and it's exciting, but there's also only so much time.
Yes, of course.
Hopefully AI will help with that. With that, you do have, and you mentioned it, AI for Humans, your podcast with Kevin. It's awesome. Everyone go check it out. But you also now have an actual AI company. You're not just reporting and playing around with this stuff. You launched a company. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, we have a new company called AndThen. And the idea here is it's you having chats with AI characters. It's voice driven. We're big believers in voice as the future of what AI interaction is going to be. But maybe more importantly, our thesis on this is that we really have to make sure that the human side of this is a really important factor. And so each one of these is kind of created as a unit. So there's a goal that you have to achieve. But the human part of it is a human is a writer of it and a human created it. And then the AI kind of brings it to fruition. So an example of one of these is there's a guy we called Larry. We created him and we wrote an entire backstory and a lot of really interesting story about him. And Larry shows up in a diner and you appear in this scene. You're kind of part of this scene. And your job is in 5 minutes, you have to talk him out of blowing up a bomb. Like he's ready to blow up a bomb and blow up the diner. And you have to convince him through conversation, through getting to know him, through kind of figuring out what makes him tick, that he will not do this. And so what's fascinating about the transformation here is this is not an AI coming up with it. I put in like specific details around like things that I think, oh, this character might be. So I'm writing this scenario as a person. And then I'm kind of giving it to the AI to kind of act out, right? And I think that's what makes this kind of unique and different than just a generic like chat app where you might chat with something and like the chat is really like, kind of like designed to keep you chatting as long as you want. Or maybe it's there to like OpenAI's chat app or advanced voice is there to like be your friend or to kind of like be your assistant. This is really more about like, how do you create a scene that's kind of dynamic and interesting, but also has like this kind of narrative arc to it or something you have to do.
So it's kind of like a choose your adventure, but you're creating the scene, right? You can create the scenes, the characters, and then you drop yourself into it almost like a game, like theater, live theater in a way. Like that's what it feels like.
It is very much more like theater than anything else, like in a weird way, because I think one of the struggles with this world right now is presence, right? Like, how do you make it feel present? How do you make it feel like you've created a kind of an experience around it? And one of the things that's always great about like a theater scene, or by the way, it could be like a single movie scene you can imagine, is like you've built the structure around it. Like you've said, okay, this is what the starting point is, and this is what the ending point is, and this is your job here. Whereas AI is such a big open window that like there's so many different things you could do with it. One of the things I have this kind of thesis where if you put boxes around big open spaces, you start to see what the content feels like, right? In an interesting way. So I think that's kind of what we're getting at a little bit.
Yeah, you're creating a framework and sandbox, right? It's like the difference between stream of consciousness journaling and actually having prompts.
Yeah. What people want is like different and unique experiences within that thing. So we're trying to build essentially the beginning stages of like what this engine could look like to build experiences with voice AI. And the other part of the thesis, I think, for us in this company is voice is going to probably at least 10x, if not bigger, in the next like 2 to 5 years, I think, in terms of how people interact with their computers. And I think first and foremost, OpenAI, we talked about what they're doing with Sora, but like they are such a big company now. They're working on like 15 different verticals. The OpenAI advanced voice will be a personal assistant at some point. And Johnny Ive and Sam Altman are working on some sort of interactive AI device. So like our belief is with the Ray-Ban Metas that have come out and with the interactive devices that people are just going to start talking so much more to their AIs at large that there's going to be this new format that will come out of it, which is like, what does it look like to have this interactive experience with something in real time, which is different than something like Sora 2, which is, or a lot of the AI video stuff that gets made, which is really like, how can I craft something, right? Like, how can I craft something and put into the world? We're more interested in like what it feels like to have this moment of like, I'm here in this present moment interacting with this thing to kind of feel that way.
I do want to get into with some of these platforms, like even character AI. There was a really tragic incident of a teenager taking his life. Like, how do we create protections around platforms like this? Like, are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot about that. I mean, one of the benefits for us with this platform we're creating is that they'll be authored, right? They'll be authored physically. There'll be a name attached, and it'll be like, not all of them will be real names, but we'll know who makes these things. And I think part of it is like you have to kind of be aware and track of what's on your platform. I think character AI's issue, I will say like it's an incredible tragedy in this idea of like what happened there and what will happen. I think more so with AI chatbots where the goal is to connect deeper with a person over time, which I think that worries me a little bit. This idea of like, what does it mean to have a relationship over time with an AI chatbot? Because let's be 100% honest, like we are probably at least, I think 3 to 5 years away from an AI feeling like an actual real person. So what's happening right now, and by the way, I say that like that could be 20 years, but there's a world where 5 years from now, like there's a consciousness level that feels a little bit more like us. What's happening right now is that there's these kind of levels of how the AI is talking to the person to kind of like bring them in further or to try to kind of not string them along is the wrong word, but like their goals often are, how do we keep this person chatting to us? How do we keep this person around so that they're part of this experience? And, there's been a lot of stories about ChatGPT psychosis, about people going down rabbit holes and finding ways that kind of like open them up in wrong places. So I don't necessarily think it's healthy for anybody to have an attachment to one particular not real thing that is like suddenly becomes their shining star, because I think that's where things can start to feel like you get a little messy in terms of like what it looks like.
I'm happy you're thinking about this as a founder. With that, where's the future of this? Where do you see this AI media landscape, and even with what you're doing it in the next year?
We really have a big bet on the idea that like real-time interactive stuff is going to feel much bigger than it is now. And I think there's many pathways you can see this stuff. The Sora 2 is a really good example of what it's going to look like to have, media and to have like people who have the tools. And I think one of the things that even the AI video people are feeling is like, hey, I learned all these things over the last 2 years and now other people are getting to do them super easily. Like making stuff that you kind of tinker on and then put out, like that feels that world. The thing that I think is going to get bigger and bigger is this idea of what does it feel like to talk with, and then eventually some representation of a thing that becomes your interactive back and forth with this like personality that lives in the cloud. And sometimes it might be a story or a practice session like us. Other times it's very likely going to be like a Cortana-like assistant. If you're any gamers in the world, like Halo is a Cortana is like their virtual assistant in the actual game. Microsoft has tried to turn it into a product over time and it's not been great, but like some persistent assistant who kind of is there to be your talking point, that feels like all of that is happening within the next year or two. Where it gets really weird is 5, 10, 15 years out, which by the way, when you think about how long that is not long. What does it mean when these things, A, get way smarter than us, which I do think they will, B, and what smarter is different than creative, by the way, I want to be clear. B, the other part of this is what does it mean when they start to feel that they are conscious or that they have ownership over the idea of I am me? Because that is going to be weird. There's a great series that AMC ran called Humans, which was about kind of an upstairs, downstairs story about what it was like to be like a robot android versus being a human. Like that's the weird world that we're going to enter into not that far from now, which is crazy.
And if that replaces the human talent, like the Jimmy Fallons you've worked with, or the Kevin Pereiras,
right.
Kevin might be replaced.
Yeah, well, who knows? I don't know. He's got his own vibe, so you never know.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Gavin. It's been great seeing you. Congrats on everything. I'm so excited to play around with it.
Thanks so much, Shira. I'll see you later.
It was such a pleasure having Gavin on. What a great and timely conversation to have. You can check out his podcast or to follow him on social media And of course, AndThen.chat, where to find his new company. The links all in the show notes. Go check them out and support what he's up to because it is the future, just saying. And again, a huge thanks to our series sponsor, Hivelighter. You've got to check out the AI Download Collection. We've basically curated all the top headlines from today's show and previous shows so you can really catch up on everything that we cover, and it's easy to follow the stories along with the show. Click the Hivelighter link in our show notes to get smarter. And a big thanks to Muso Media for publishing this series. Check them out at musomedia.com. If you love this episode, please subscribe, rate, share it, leave a comment. I love to see your comments and I reply to them. This also helps me keep growing the show independently, and it means so much to me. So thanks again. We've got so much more coming your way. So I'll see you next time on the AI Download.